One sudden scream mid-flight shatters the calm. It's not real. In that instant, everything you believed about reality begins to crumble, pulling you into a thrilling and mysterious journey beyond imagination. Stay with me. This story will keep you hooked until the very end. Before we dive in, let me ask, where are you watching or reading this story from? Drop a quick comment below and share your thoughts. The hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin with a steady, almost hypnotic drone as Flight 792 soared at 35,000 feet somewhere over the vast expanse of the Midwest. Outside the window, the sky stretched endlessly, an infinite canvas of soft blue, streaked with the occasional cotton candy cloud. Inside, passengers settled into their seats with the familiar mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. Some read books, others chatted quietly or stared at their phones, while few dozed lightly, lulled by the rhythmic vibration beneath them. Among the passengers was Emma Collins, a woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor that seemed to betray a restless mind beneath. She wore a simple gray cardigan and jeans, her blonde hair loosely tied back, but her posture hinted at alertness. Emma was no ordinary traveler. She was a psychology professor from Boston, en route to a conference in Los Angeles. But more than that, she carried a weight of secrets she kept locked deep inside. As the flight attendants made their rounds distributing snacks and drinks, Emma gazed out the window, her thoughts far away from the mundane hum of in-flight announcements. Her mind raced over fragmented memories, faces, conversations, images flickering at the edge of her consciousness. Something had been bothering her for weeks, a nagging sense that reality was not as solid as it seemed. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but the feeling was growing stronger. A low-level anxiety hummed beneath her calm exterior, like the subtle vibration of a machine just about to malfunction. Around her, the cabin was a bubble of normalcy, but inside Emma's mind, an alarm bell was ringing. The seatbelt sign blinked off, and passengers began to move around, stretching limbs or visiting the lavatories. A young mother soothed her crying toddler. A businessman tapped away furiously on his laptop, and a group of college students laughed softly, oblivious to the invisible tension settling over Emma. She pressed her fingertips to her temples, trying to steady herself, but then suddenly the feeling shifted. Something inside her snapped. Her breath caught, her eyes widened, and with a force that startled those nearest her, Emma rose to her feet and screamed, "It's not real." The sound cut through the cabin like a jagged knife, slicing through the polite chatter and subdued cabin noise. Heads turned, eyes locking onto Emma as shock rippled through the passengers. The flight attendants froze mid-step. The pilot's voice came over the intercom asking if there was a medical emergency, and whispers erupted. What did she say? Is she okay? Emma's voice trembled, but she stood tall, her gaze wild but desperate. This plane, all of you, this sky, none of it is real. We're trapped in some kind of illusion. The words fell heavy, thick with a conviction that made some uneasy. Many dismissed it immediately as a breakdown, but a few passengers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing something beneath the surface, something deeper than a moment of panic. The air shifted. The plane suddenly felt smaller, more claustrophobic, like a cage rather than a vessel of freedom. Emma's outburst wasn't just a random flare of anxiety. It was the start of a storm that would unravel everything the passengers thought they knew about themselves and the world around them. The calm, ordered flight was a fragile facade, soon to be shattered by truths that would defy their understanding of reality. As the flight attendants gently tried to guide Emma back into her seat, she resisted briefly, eyes scanning the cabin as if seeking allies in a crowd of strangers. The stewardess, a composed woman named Rachel, knelt beside her and asked softly, "Are you all right? Do you need medical help?" Emma shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper now. "You don't understand. None of this is real." Rachel exchanged a worried glance with another attendant before nodding to the cockpit. The captain's voice crackled again, more urgently now. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are handling the situation. But Emma's scream had broken the illusion of safety. Beneath the polite exterior of this flight, an invisible tension had been exposed. The journey across America, meant to be just another day of travel, had become the first step into a mystery that would pull everyone on board into a terrifying new reality. The cabin was stunned into silence, the passengers frozen in place as Emma's scream still echoed in their ears. "It's not real," she had shouted. Words so strange, so unexpected, they seemed almost impossible to comprehend. For a moment, nobody moved. Some glanced nervously at one another, while others stared at Emma, as if she had suddenly become a figure from another world. The flight attendants exchanged worried looks. Rachel, the lead attendant, knelt beside Emma again, speaking in a calm voice. "Ma'am, please sit down. You're safe." But Emma's wide eyes betrayed a mind that refused to settle. The other passengers' faces reflected a mix of confusion and fear. Children started to cry quietly, and a middle-aged man gripped the armrests of his seat, sweat beading on his forehead. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, firm but measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. There is no cause for alarm. A passenger is experiencing distress, and we are handling the situation." Yet, Emma's declaration had unsettled the carefully controlled environment of the airplane. The routine, the monotony of a long flight, had been shattered. People whispered amongst themselves, "What did she mean? What isn't real?" A few dismissed it as a mental breakdown, something best ignored, but some found themselves wondering if there was truth behind the bizarre statement. The air seemed to thicken with tension. Emma sat back down, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her seatbelt. Her breathing was uneven, her mind racing. She wanted to explain, to make them understand, but the words tangled in her throat. This isn't just a panic attack, she thought. Something's terribly wrong. She glanced sideways at the man next to her, Mark, who had remained unusually calm during the chaos. His dark eyes met hers briefly, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Mark leaned in and whispered, "It's all a simulation." Emma's heart pounded harder. Here was someone else who knew. She wasn't alone. Mark wasn't just any passenger. He was part of a covert group of specialists who had been monitoring this experiment for months. They had warned Emma that the technology behind this flight was more than just a plane ride. It was a test of a new virtual reality project designed to immerse participants so deeply that they could no longer distinguish between real and fabricated experience. Now, that experiment had spun out of control, trapping everyone aboard. The implications were staggering, but speaking openly could provoke panic, so they had to be cautious. Emma nodded, barely able to keep her voice steady. "We need to convince them, or they'll never believe us." Mark simply nodded back. Meanwhile, the passengers tried to return to some semblance of normalcy. The flight attendants resumed their duties, their smiles tight, eyes darting nervously. Some people focused on their devices or books, desperate to distract themselves. But the undercurrent of unease was unmistakable. The sensation that the world was shifting beneath their feet lingered in the air like static electricity. Emma's shout had cracked the veneer of reality, and nothing would ever feel the same again. Suddenly, the plane lurched slightly, a barely perceptible shudder that sent a few drinks spilling. Murmurs erupted. What was that? Is the turbulence getting worse? Emma's pulse quickened. This was no ordinary bump in the sky. It was a glitch in the system, a signal that the illusion was beginning to unravel. The walls of the cabin seemed to flicker for a split second, as if the paint was peeling away to reveal something beneath. The faces around her blurred and sharpened in unnatural rhythms. Emma gripped the armrests, trying to stay grounded, while Mark scanned the rows with a calculating gaze. Rachel approached them cautiously, her voice low. "Sir, ma'am, if there's something wrong, please tell us so we can help." Emma looked at her, the desperation clear in her eyes. "You have to listen. We're not on a real plane. This is a controlled environment, a simulation. None of this is real." Rachel blinked, shaken but skeptical. "You're safe here. There's no danger." But Emma's words had already planted a seed of doubt. For some passengers, that seed would grow into fear, for others, curiosity. As the captain's voice returned, more insistent this time. We are experiencing minor technical difficulties, but there is no cause for concern. Emma realized that official reassurances were part of the simulation's programming, to maintain order, to suppress rebellion. The very system designed to protect them was now their prison guard. Emma's scream had been a beacon, awakening a fragile truth in a sea of denial. Now, the question was whether anyone else would dare to wake up before it was too late. The cabin's uneasy quiet stretched on as Emma took a deep breath and began to speak more clearly, her voice still trembling but filled with a newfound determination. Listen, everyone. What I said earlier, it's true. This plane, this flight, even the sky outside, none of it is real. We're inside a simulation. Her words hung in the recycled air, fragile and unbelievable, yet impossible to ignore. Most passengers looked away, dismissing her as a scared woman unraveling under stress. But a handful exchanged skeptical glances, their curiosity quietly ignited. What if she wasn't crazy? What if the world they saw through the windows was a meticulously crafted illusion? Mark leaned closer to Emma and whispered, "We have to explain it carefully. If we frighten them too much, the system will react. Panic is the simulation's enemy." Emma nodded and cleared her throat, speaking louder this time. "This isn't some ordinary flight. It's part of an experiment, advanced virtual reality designed to create the perfect simulation of a plane journey. The problem is something went wrong. We're trapped inside, and we don't know how to get out." A young woman with sharp eyes, sitting a few rows away, raised her hand hesitantly. "If this is a simulation, why are we here? And who would do this to us?" The question rippled through the group. Emma met her gaze and replied, "It started as a government project meant to study human reactions in controlled environments. But it's become something else. A cage. We're all test subjects." Across the aisle, an older man with a thick beard whispered, "This sounds like science fiction. How can we prove any of it?" Emma's mind raced. She knew the theory was incredible, but she had to find proof. "Look around," she said, pointing to the flickering cabin lights, the occasional glitch in the windows showing the sky jumping unnaturally. "Have you noticed the strange moments? Like reality skipping or things repeating?" Slowly, several passengers nodded, recalling moments they had dismissed. The simulation, like a malfunctioning machine, was starting to reveal its cracks. A flight attendant's voice faltered briefly in the intercom, words looping strangely before correcting itself, further feeding the unease. Mark took a breath and added, "We need to stick together and observe. Panic will only make the system tighten its grip. Our goal is to find the exit, the way back to the real world." His calm presence gave weight to the words, and more people leaned in to listen, their disbelief mingling with fear and hope. Emma's heart pounded. This was the turning point. If even a few understood, they might survive. Meanwhile, the captain's voice came over the speaker, steady and unshaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing minor turbulence. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts." Yet, something about the mechanical tone felt artificial, rehearsed. Emma imagined the control room beyond the simulation, where unseen operators monitored every heartbeat, every reaction. They were trapped in an elaborate illusion, and their minds had become the battleground. Despite the tension, Emma felt a strange resolve. Her role was no longer just a passenger's. She was a leader in this strange limbo, a beacon in the fog of confusion. The passengers who had once ignored her now looked to her with a mixture of fear and trust. A young man near the back, who had seemed indifferent before, whispered, "What happens if we don't escape?" Emma met his eyes steadily. "We risk losing ourselves, our memories, our sense of who we are. The simulation can erase us, override our minds, keep us trapped forever." The thought sent a chill through the group. The stakes were higher than they had imagined. Rachel, the lead flight attendant, approached quietly. Her face was pale, and she avoided direct eye contact with Emma. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she confessed softly. "But if what you say is true, we need to find a way out before it's too late." That admission was small, but monumental. Even the programmed guardians of the flight felt cracks in their own reality. The fragile alliance between human and machine had shifted. As the plane hummed steadily onward, the passengers sat in tense silence, united by a growing realization. Their world was not what it seemed. Emma stared out the window, the digital clouds drifting past like ghostly illusions, and whispered to herself, "This isn't just a flight. It's a prison, and we have to find the key." As the uneasy silence settled in the cabin, Emma's thoughts whirled relentlessly. Her heart still thudded from the chaos she'd unleashed moments ago, but she felt a flicker of hope in the presence of Mark, the man beside her who seemed as aware of their predicament as she was. He hadn't just sat quietly through the ordeal. He understood what was happening. His calm, steady demeanor was a stark contrast to the growing panic around them. When the murmurs quieted slightly, Mark leaned in and whispered, "We're not alone in this. There are others who know, but they're too afraid to speak." Emma glanced at him, studying his face carefully, a man in his late 30s with close-cropped dark hair and sharp, observant eyes. There was something reassuring in the way he spoke, yet a shadow of urgency behind his words. "How do you know all this?" she asked softly, keeping her voice low so the nearby passengers wouldn't hear. Mark glanced around nervously before answering. "I've been tracking this simulation for months. There's a secret group, people trapped in experiments like this, forced to live in false realities without knowing it. I'm part of an effort to expose it." Emma felt a chill. The idea of being part of a larger conspiracy was frightening, but also strangely liberating. It explained the surreal moments she'd sensed, those glitches in time, the flickering walls, the repetitive conversations she couldn't ignore. Mark's presence was like a lifeline in a storm, offering a chance to anchor herself in the truth. "So what now? How do we get out?" she asked, desperation creeping in her voice. Mark shook his head slightly. "It's not that simple. The simulation is designed to keep us trapped. The controls are sophisticated. But if we can find the weak points, the glitches, the errors, we might be able to break through." Around them, the cabin remained tense. Passengers shifted uneasily in their seats, eyes darting toward Emma and Mark with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Some still whispered about what Emma had shouted, while others focused on their own attempts to distract themselves. The flight attendants maintained their composed exterior, but the occasional nervous glance betrayed their unease. Rachel, the lead attendant, approached cautiously, offering a tentative smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Emma caught the tension in Rachel's posture, sensing the woman was caught between following protocol and acknowledging the growing fear around her. Mark's voice dropped further as he explained, "This isn't just a technical failure. The simulation reacts to our awareness. If too many people realize it's fake, the system tries to shut down those memories or reset the scenario entirely." Emma shivered at the thought. "So we have to be careful, but also act fast. If they reset us, we lose everything. Our memories, our identities." The weight of those words pressed heavily on her chest. The fight for escape wasn't just about leaving the plane. It was about preserving their very selves. Emma glanced out the window. The clouds rolled by in unnatural patterns, like digital glitches in a corrupted file. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting an eerie glow that seemed almost staged. "If we can't trust what we see, how do we know what's real?" she whispered. Mark gave a grim smile. "That's the question we all face. But right now, the only reality we can trust is the connection between us, the people who know the truth." The two shared a brief moment of understanding, silently agreeing to work together. Emma felt a spark of determination rise within her. This flight, this strange, suspended moment, wasn't just a nightmare. It was a battleground, and she wasn't going to give up without a fight. Mark's presence was a reminder that even in the darkest illusions, the human spirit could find a way to resist. As the plane continued its steady flight across the continent, Emma felt the first real flicker of hope. The mystery of their captivity was beginning to unravel, and with Mark by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The plane hummed steadily, the faint vibration beneath their feet a constant reminder of their suspended journey through the sky, or so they had believed. But to Emma and Mark, every second that passed brought new evidence that this flight was no ordinary passage through the clouds. A sudden flicker caught Emma's eye. The overhead lights dimmed and brightened erratically, casting fleeting shadows that seemed to twist and stretch unnaturally. The plastic armrest beside her shifted slightly, as if caught in a ripple of unseen waves. Mark noticed it too, his gaze sharpening. "It's a glitch," he murmured. "The simulation is starting to fail." Around them, the passengers remained mostly oblivious, though a few glanced up from their devices with puzzled expressions. The faint disturbances were easy to dismiss, brushed off as mere quirks of a long flight. But Emma knew better. These glitches were cracks in the facade, weak spots where the illusion faltered and the truth threatened to break through. She gripped the armrest tightly, her pulse quickening. "If this is failing, what does that mean for us?" she whispered urgently. Mark's eyes scanned the cabin, alert for any sign of further anomalies. "It means the system is unstable, and when that happens, it tries to correct itself by resetting or isolating the source of the disturbance." His voice was calm, but carried a warning. "We could lose our memories, or worse, be trapped here indefinitely." Emma swallowed hard. The stakes had never been clearer. Their fight wasn't just to escape the plane, it was to keep their minds intact. Suddenly, the screen on the back of the seat in front of Emma flickered to life, displaying an image that didn't belong, a blurry, pixelated face that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Nearby passengers blinked, confused. "Did you see that?" a woman whispered. Emma nodded, heart pounding. "It's happening more frequently." Mark's jaw tightened. "The system is breaking down, but we can use this. If we can find the source of these glitches, maybe we can exploit them." Rachel, the lead flight attendant, approached cautiously, her usual composed demeanor replaced by a flicker of unease. "There's been an unusual spike in system errors," she admitted quietly. "We're trying to keep things under control, but it's like the plane is unstable." Emma exchanged a glance with Mark, sensing that even those tasked with maintaining order were beginning to question reality. The cracks were no longer hidden. The turbulence began anew, stronger this time, rattling the cabin and causing overhead bins to shake. Passengers murmured nervously, clutching their armrests. Emma closed her eyes, focusing on Mark's steady presence beside her. "We have to find a control panel," Mark said quietly. "If we can access it, maybe we can override the simulation and get out." Emma nodded, a surge of determination fueling her. She knew the path ahead would be dangerous, but the alternative, remaining trapped in this artificial nightmare, was unthinkable. As the turbulence subsided, a sudden jolt shook the plane violently, sending a ripple through the cabin. A flicker passed over the windows, momentarily revealing a dark, endless void beyond the illusion of sky and clouds. Gasps erupted around them. Emma's breath caught. The veil was thinning, and the truth was clawing its way to the surface. Mark reached for her hand, his grip firm. "Stay with me," he urged. "We're closer than ever." The plane steadied once more, but the tension remained thick. Emma glanced around at the faces of the passengers, some pale with fear, others frozen in disbelief. The flight, meant to be a simple crossing of the continent, had transformed into a battle for reality itself. And somewhere, deep within the system's labyrinth, lay the key to their freedom. The moment the plane steadied after the last violent jolt, Emma's mind raced. She knew their chance to escape was slipping away with every passing minute. The glitches, the flickers, the brief glimpses beyond the illusion, all signs that the simulation was unraveling. But that also meant the system's defenses would soon tighten, closing the cracks before they could widen. Mark's grip on her hand was firm and reassuring as he whispered, "We need to find the control panel. It's the heart of the simulation. If we can access it, we might override this whole nightmare." The words gave Emma a sharp focus. Her fear was replaced with purpose. They exchanged glances, silently agreeing that the next move had to be swift and careful. Neither wanted to alert the flight crew or other passengers too much. If the system detected they were trying to interfere, it could trigger a reset or worse. The cabin was tense, but outwardly calm, as if the world was still perfectly normal, even as the cracks widened beneath the surface. Emma glanced at Rachel, the lead flight attendant, who was speaking quietly to her colleagues, their faces pale but composed. Would they be allies or obstacles? Emma wasn't sure, but she knew the key wouldn't be in plain sight. Mark led the way toward the cockpit door. The control panel isn't inside the cockpit, he explained in a hushed tone. It's hidden somewhere in the plane's infrastructure, a kind of digital core that runs the simulation. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat, her eyes flicking nervously around the narrow aisle. The other passengers were oblivious or too distracted by their own fears to notice two people quietly slipping toward the front of the plane. Mark's familiarity with the layout was clear. He moved with confidence, as if he'd studied this exact scenario before. As they neared the cockpit, the usual hum of the plane seemed to deepen, vibrating in Emma's chest like a warning. The cockpit door was locked, but Mark pulled a small, sophisticated-looking device from his pocket. "This will bypass the lock, but only for a few minutes," he whispered. Emma held her breath as the lock clicked open silently. They slipped inside quickly, the cool air of the cockpit replacing the warm, recycled atmosphere of the cabin. The two pilots looked up, startled, but too conditioned to question their presence immediately. Emma and Mark didn't have time for explanations. Mark hurried to a panel beneath the main controls and began tapping a sequence into a hidden keypad. "This is it," he said quietly, sweat beading on his forehead. The screen before them flickered, then shifted to reveal lines of code streaming across the display. Complex, alive, and threatening. "The control panel," Emma whispered, all mixed with dread. She reached out tentatively to touch the screen, but Mark stopped her. "Wait, this is delicate. One wrong move, and the system could detect us." Together, they scanned the data, looking for weaknesses, anything that could help them break free. Emma's fingers hovered over the controls, her mind spinning. Suddenly, the screen pulsed, and a new message appeared. "System alert. Unauthorized access detected." The cockpit lights flickered ominously. Emma's heart raced as alarms began to sound faintly in the background. They had been detected. Mark's expression hardened. "We have seconds. I'll try to disable the security protocols. You find the exit point, where the simulation can be broken." Emma nodded, pushing aside her fear. She scanned the screen and found a series of nodes representing different parts of the simulation. One node was flashing red, an error, a vulnerability. "Here," she said quickly. "This is our chance." Mark worked furiously to keep the system from locking them out, fingers flying over the keyboard. Emma initiated a command to open a back door, a hidden exit from the simulation. The plane jolted violently, as if the very fabric of their digital prison was resisting the intrusion. Outside the cockpit windows, the sky shimmered unnaturally, as if reality itself was flickering. Passengers screamed softly, gripping their seats as the world wobbled. Suddenly, the screen went black. For a breathless moment, the cockpit was silent except for the pounding of Emma's heart. Then the system rebooted, the alarm stopped, and the normal flight displays returned. But Emma knew this was just the beginning. They had cracked the door open, but the fight to escape had only just begun. The cockpit door slid shut behind Emma and Mark, leaving the hum of the plane's engines as a steady backdrop. But inside, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The brief chaos from their unauthorized access to the control panel had rippled outward, unsettling the fabric of the simulation. Emma's pulse hammered in her ears as she glanced at Mark, whose face was tight with tension. "We've triggered something," he muttered. "The system is fighting back." Outside their small sanctuary, muffled voices rose in confusion and fear. The passengers were beginning to notice the glitches, the flickers in the air, the subtle but unexplainable disturbances. Whispers turned to murmurs, and murmurs edged into panicked questions. Emma stepped into the cabin as quietly as she could, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. The faces around her were pale and wide-eyed, the earlier disbelief shattered by the creeping realization that something was very wrong. A man near the back muttered, "Did anyone else see the lights?" They were flickering like crazy. A young woman nodded vigorously, clutching her armrest. In the sky outside, it looked like it was glitching, like a video game that's breaking. Emma took a deep breath, stepping forward. "It's real," she said simply. "We're trapped inside a simulation, and it's starting to break down." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with disbelief and fear. Some passengers shifted uneasily, while others stared at her with a mix of hope and desperation. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, this time more violently, and the overhead compartments rattled as if caught in a storm. The air grew colder, and the hum of the engines distorted into a low, ominous drone. People gasped and looked around wildly. Emma's voice rose, steady and urgent. "Stay calm. We have to stick together. Panic will only make it worse." But calm was a fragile thing. A child near the front began to cry, and soon others joined, their distress echoing through the cabin. Flight attendants tried to reassure passengers, but even they were clearly rattled. Rachel's voice trembled slightly as she instructed everyone to remain seated and fasten their seatbelts. Mark moved swiftly through the rows, quietly speaking to people, offering reassurance where he could. "We need to find a way out of this simulation," he told a group of increasingly anxious passengers. "The glitches are a sign the system is unstable, but they're also our chance." Emma nodded, watching as the tension in the cabin spiraled. She could feel the weight of every fearful glance, every whispered question. The simulation was breaking down, and with it, the fragile barrier between illusion and reality. As the turbulence grew stronger, the windows flickered again, revealing brief flashes of a black void beyond, the true emptiness that lay outside the simulation. Gasps filled the cabin as passengers caught glimpses of the dark abyss. "What is that?" a man shouted. Emma stepped forward, her voice firm. "That's what's outside this fake world. If we don't escape, we'll be trapped here forever." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Suddenly, the emergency lights snapped on, bathing the cabin in an eerie red glow. The intercom crackled to life with a distorted voice repeating, "Emergency protocol activated. Do not panic. Do not panic." But the mechanical tone only heightened the fear. Emma reached for Mark's hand. "We have to move quickly. The system is trying to control us." Mark nodded grimly. "If it resets again, it could erase our memories completely. We can't let that happen." Together, they rallied a group of passengers who had begun to believe the truth, forming a fragile alliance against the growing chaos. Emma's heart ached as she saw the fear in their eyes, but also a spark of determination. This wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about survival, about holding on to their identities in a world designed to erase them. The plane shuddered violently, throwing everyone forward. A collective gasp filled the cabin. Emma gritted her teeth, knowing the battle had only just begun. The simulation was fighting back harder than ever, but so were they, and she was ready to fight with everything she had. The red emergency lights bathed the cabin in a surreal, blood-tinged glow as the plane continued to tremble with a strange intensity. Emma's mind raced, each heartbeat pounding with urgency. The passengers' panic was spreading like wildfire, threatening to overwhelm the fragile sense of order she and Mark had worked so hard to maintain. She knew that if they didn't act soon, the simulation's reset protocols would erase their memories. Everything they had fought to remember, the truth they had uncovered, and the hope for freedom itself. Emma swallowed her fear and drew a deep breath. It was time to make a desperate plan. Mark stood beside her, silent but alert, his eyes scanning the cabin and the flickering monitors of the control panel they had briefly accessed. "We can't just wait," he said, voice low but firm. "The system is closing ranks, trying to isolate the glitches and patch the holes we opened." Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we hit it where it hurts. We disrupt the simulation's core, force a full system crash. It's risky, but it might be the only way out." Mark's eyes flickered with a mix of determination and fear. "If we succeed, the simulation will collapse completely, and we'll have to face what's beyond. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine, but she pushed it aside. The unknown outside was terrifying, but the alternative, living forever trapped in this artificial nightmare, was worse. She moved quickly to rally the passengers who had begun to understand the truth. "Listen," she said, voice steady despite the chaos around her. "We're not alone in this. This plane, this flight, it's a trap. But together, we can fight back. We have to reach the core control system hidden in the cargo hold. It's the heart of the simulation. If we can destroy it, we can break free." A murmur of shock and fear rippled through the group, but also a flicker of hope. People who had been paralyzed by fear now began to stir, rallying around Emma's words. Rachel, the lead flight attendant, stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "I'll help you," she said quietly. "I know the layout better than anyone. We'll need to move fast before the system locks everything down." Emma's heart lifted. Allies mattered. They couldn't win alone. Mark produced a small, modified tablet that displayed a map of the plane's interior layers. "The cargo hold is beneath the floor panels at the rear," he explained. "There's a hidden access point beneath one of the seats. We have to get there without alerting the system's security protocols." Emma swallowed again. The stakes were sky high, but she knew they had no choice. The group moved carefully through the cabin, tension crackling in the air. Every flicker of the lights, every mechanical hum sent waves of anxiety through the passengers. Emma kept her eyes fixed on the path ahead, her mind calculating the risks. The flight attendants moved with quiet urgency, calming frightened passengers and clearing the way. As they approached the rear exit, the floor panels beneath the last row of seats glimmered faintly. Another glitch, another door opening. Emma knelt and pressed a sequence of hidden buttons on the floor, and with a soft hiss, the panels slid open, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. The group hesitated only briefly before beginning their descent, the air growing colder and heavier as they moved into the belly of the plane. The hum of the engines was distant now, replaced by a low electronic buzz that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the simulation itself. At the bottom, Emma's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing rows of blinking servers and tangled wires. This was the nerve center. Mark began to work immediately, typing commands into a terminal that flickered with code. Emma and Rachel stood guard, listening for any sign the system was responding. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move, and they would be locked in, trapped forever. Finally, Mark looked up. "I found a main control node. If we can overload the system here, it should trigger a full shutdown." Emma nodded and reached out, pressing the big red override button. The terminal flashed wildly. Alarms blared, and the entire cargo hold seemed to vibrate as if the simulation itself was screaming in protest. The last thing Emma saw before darkness swallowed her was a glimpse of the true sky. Vast, empty, and eerily quiet. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, she felt the fragile stirrings of freedom. The cargo hold's air turned electric with tension as alarms blared and lights flickered erratically. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, the deafening noise mixing with the eerie hum of the simulation's core screaming in protest. Around her, passengers who had followed her descent into the belly of the plane clung to the fragile hope that this desperate gambit might finally shatter their artificial prison. Mark's fingers flew over the keyboard, coaxing commands from the blinking consoles. "We're overloading the core," he shouted above the chaos, sweat beading on his forehead. "But the system won't go down quietly." Suddenly, the floor beneath them vibrated violently, throwing several people off balance. Emma grabbed Rachel's arm, steadying her. Outside, through a small observation window embedded in the cargo door, Emma saw the world flickering, like a faulty projection peeling away at the edges. The black void beyond grew larger, swallowing the shimmering illusion of clouds and sky. For a brief moment, the truth was undeniable. They were suspended not in air, but in a void of nothingness, trapped inside a fabricated dream. The alarms shifted pitch, and the room plunged into darkness. Emergency backup lights cast long, wavering shadows, distorting the faces of the frightened group. "It's trying to reboot," Mark said grimly. "If it succeeds, we lose everything." Emma's eyes scanned the terminal for any signs of progress. The code was unraveling, lines of corrupted data flashing in a rapid, chaotic dance across the screens. Suddenly, a sharp blast of static erupted from the speakers, followed by a distorted voice, barely human. "Intruders detected. System defense activated." The group froze, fear rippling through them like electricity. The simulation was no longer a passive trap. It was fighting back, actively defending itself against their rebellion. Emma's voice was steady, cutting through the panic. "We have to keep going. Don't let it scare you." They worked frantically, racing against time as the core's integrity eroded. The terminal displayed a progress bar crawling toward a full system crash. Each second felt stretched into an eternity. The air buzzed with energy as circuits overloaded and sparks flew from exposed wiring. Emma could feel the pulse of the simulation fading, like a heartbeat slowing before it stops. Suddenly, the cargo hold shook violently, and a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber, growing louder and more intense. The walls seemed to ripple as if reality itself was bending under the pressure. A bright flash of light engulfed the room, blinding everyone for a moment. When their vision cleared, Emma found herself staring at a space unlike any she had ever seen. No longer confined by the plane's metallic walls, but floating in a void speckled with faint, distant stars. The passengers gasped in awe and fear. "Is this real?" a voice whispered. Emma took a tentative step forward, heart racing. The sense of vertigo was overwhelming, but so was the strange exhilaration of true freedom. Mark smiled weakly. "We made it out, but this is just the beginning." The simulation had shattered, but the world beyond was vast, unknown, and filled with challenges they had yet to face. Emma's mind flooded with questions. Where were they? Why were they trapped in the first place? And most importantly, what was waiting for them in this empty expanse? The answers lay somewhere out there, past the void, and she knew that if they were to survive and find their way home, they would need to stay united. As the last echoes of the simulation's collapse faded, Emma clenched her fists, ready for whatever lay ahead. The nightmare was over, but the true journey had just begun. The silence was overwhelming after the chaos of the simulation's collapse. Emma blinked against the soft glow of stars scattered in the endless void around them. The metallic confines of the plane were gone, replaced by a strange weightlessness that pulled at their limbs and minds alike. The passengers who had followed her looked around in stunned silence, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. Mark stood beside her, his expression somber but resolute. "This isn't home," he said quietly, "but it's real. More real than anything we experienced on that plane." Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady the swirling thoughts in her head. They had escaped the digital prison, but what they had stepped into was unknown territory. There were no familiar landmarks, no solid ground, just the infinite black sprinkled with faint, distant lights. It was beautiful in a haunting way, but also terrifyingly empty. The weight of their situation settled on her chest like a stone. They were trapped once more, but this time in an uncharted reality. Rachel moved closer, her voice trembling slightly as she said, "What now? How do we survive out here?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Emma's gaze drifted to the passengers, many of whom were beginning to panic. "We stay together," she said firmly. "We find shelter, resources, anything that can keep us alive and help us understand this place." The group nodded, their fear tempered by her determination. Mark pulled out the tablet that had guided them through the plane's corridors, but it was useless now. The device flickered and died, disconnected from any known network or signal. Emma frowned. "We can't rely on technology anymore. We have to trust our instincts." The gravity of that statement was clear. This new reality didn't respond to their old tools or rules. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Emma's eye, a shimmering shape forming in the distance. The passengers gasped and clustered together, eyes fixed on the strange apparition. As it drew closer, the shape became clearer. A vast structure, crystalline and glowing faintly with an inner light, floating silently in the void. It looked like a colossal city, suspended in space, its towers reaching into the darkness. Mark's eyes lit up with cautious hope. That might be a settlement, someone's home, maybe a way to find answers. Emma felt a surge of relief, but also trepidation. Approaching the city meant stepping deeper into the unknown. We don't know who or what lives there. We need to be careful. Rachel nodded in agreement, her previous fear replaced by a growing resolve. The group began to move toward the glowing city, propelled by a mixture of fear and hope. The vast emptiness surrounded them, each step heavy with uncertainty. Emma's mind raced with questions. How did they get trapped in the simulation in the first place? Was this city their salvation or another prison? And what dangers awaited them inside its shimmering walls? As they drew nearer, the city's intricate patterns shimmered with an ethereal beauty, unlike anything Emma had ever seen. The structures pulsed gently, as if alive, and the air vibrated with a strange energy. The passengers exchanged wary glances, feeling both awe and unease. Emma's heart hammered. This new reality was beautiful, yes, but it was also a puzzle they had to solve to survive. Mart's voice broke the silence. We need to find someone who can explain this place, help us understand what happened to us. Emma nodded, and we have to stick together. We can't afford to lose anyone now. The group tightened their formation, each person drawing strength from the others. As they approached the city's gates, the shimmering walls began to pulse more rapidly, lights blinking like a heartbeat. Emma took a deep breath, preparing herself for whatever awaited on the other side. This was no longer just about escape. It was about survival, discovery, and the hope of finding a way home. The true test of their courage was just beginning. As Emma and the group approached the shimmering gates of the crystalline city, the air hummed with a peculiar energy. The structure was unlike anything they had ever encountered. A vast, radiant metropolis suspended in the void, its spires reaching toward unseen horizons. The gates slowly parted with a sound like a breath, inviting them inside. The passengers exchanged nervous glances but stepped forward, driven by hope and curiosity. Emma's heart pounded fiercely. Every step brought them closer to answers, but also deeper into uncertainty. The city streets were paved with smooth, translucent tiles that seemed to pulse gently beneath their feet, glowing softly in shades of blue and white. Strange symbols flickered along the walls, and the architecture twisted in impossible shapes that defied logic. It felt alive, as if the city itself were a sentient being watching their every move. Emma could feel the weight of eyes upon them, unseen but palpable. She gathered the group close. Stay alert. We don't know what's waiting here. As they moved deeper inside, the ambient light grew brighter, illuminating figures that emerged from the shadows. Tall, slender beings with luminous skin and eyes like stars. The passengers froze, startled by their alien appearance, but relieved by their calm demeanor. One of the beings stepped forward, speaking in a melodic voice that somehow everyone understood. Welcome, travelers. You have crossed from illusion to truth. This city is a sanctuary, one of many, preserved beyond the simulation's reach. Emma stepped forward cautiously. Who are you? Why were we trapped in that simulation? The being's eyes softened with empathy. You were part of an experiment, a test to prepare humanity for the vast unknown. The simulation was designed to protect your minds until you were ready to awaken. The passengers murmured in disbelief and confusion. Why us? Why put us through such terror? Emma demanded. The being replied, because fear sharpens the mind. It forces you to confront your deepest truths. Now, you have awakened. The next phase awaits. Rachel stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. What is this next phase? How do we survive in this reality? The being gestured, and a holographic map appeared, revealing countless other cities, glowing faintly in the void. Many realms exist beyond the simulation, each a challenge and a haven. You must learn, adapt, and unite. Only then can you find your way back to your original world, if that is your desire. Mark's eyes narrowed. And what happens if we fail? The being's gaze grew serious. Failure means becoming lost, drifting forever in the void. But your courage has brought you this far. Together, you may shape your destiny. The group absorbed the weight of the message, the gravity of their situation settling on them anew. Emma looked around at the faces of her companions, fearful, uncertain, yet resilient. We've survived the simulation. We can survive this too, she said firmly. But we have to stick together, learn everything we can, and never lose hope. The beings nodded in approval. You will be guided. You have passed the first trial. As the group followed their new guide through the city's twisting corridors and radiant halls, Emma felt a cautious optimism. The nightmare was not over, but they had moved beyond its grip. The real journey, the fight for survival, identity, and home, had only just begun. The city of light shimmered around them, a beacon in the vast unknown, promising both peril and possibility. The crystalline city thrummed with a quiet energy as Emma and the group followed their luminous guides through winding corridors and expansive chambers bathed in iridescent light. The air was cool and pure, carrying a faint hum that seemed to resonate within their bones. Every step felt like crossing deeper into an ancient mystery, a realm where time and space folded in unfamiliar ways. Emma's senses sharpened, aware that this was more than a mere sanctuary. It was a crucible designed to test and transform. The beings, whom the group came to call the Guardians, led them to a vast hall where shimmering panels floated mid-air, displaying complex symbols and shifting images. A guardian spoke softly, "This is the Hall of Knowledge. Here, you will learn the truths behind your reality and the powers you can wield beyond the simulation." Emma stepped forward, feeling a mix of awe and apprehension. The weight of what they faced pressed on her, but beneath it burned a fierce determination. One by one, the Guardians shared insights. They explained that the simulation was created to shield humanity from an impending cosmic event that fractured dimensions and threatened existence itself. Emma absorbed the revelation. Their world was only one thread in a vast multiverse, fragile and intertwined with countless others. Your minds were protected inside the simulation to prevent madness, a guardian explained. But now, you must awaken fully to navigate the realities beyond. The lessons grew more intense as the hours passed. The Guardians taught the group to harness their thoughts, to bend perception and influence energy around them, a skill they called shaping. Emma felt a surge of power as she focused, sensing the environment respond subtly to her will. The passengers, despite exhaustion, pushed themselves to grasp these new abilities, realizing that survival here depended on mastering the unknown. Rachel, still trembling from their ordeal, found strength in the teachings. "I never imagined this was possible," she said quietly. "But I feel connected, like I'm part of something greater." Mark nodded, his analytical mind racing to understand the mechanics of this place. It's like the simulation was a primer, a test and training ground. Now, we have to use what we learned to face what's next. As the lessons progressed, Emma sensed that their unity was their greatest asset. The Guardians emphasized cooperation and trust. Alone, you are vulnerable. Together, you can navigate the shifting realities and protect each other from the void's dangers. The group's bonds deepened, their fear giving way to mutual support and hope. But amidst the growth, a shadow of doubt lingered in Emma's mind. The Guardians had not revealed everything. There were secrets still locked behind the shimmering walls. She wondered what lay beyond the city, what trials awaited in the vast void. The unknown stretched before them like a vast ocean of stars, beautiful yet unforgiving. At the end of the session, the Guardians bestowed each passenger a small, glowing shard, an artifact linked to their newly awakened abilities and the city's energy. "This will guide you," the lead Guardian said. "But beware, the void is full of entities that seek to corrupt and consume. Your journey will test every lesson you have learned." Emma clutched the shard tightly, feeling its warmth pulse against her palm. She exchanged determined looks with Mark and Rachel. They had come far, from prisoners of a cruel simulation to fledgling navigators of a cosmic expanse. But the true challenge lay ahead. As the group rested in the city's tranquil chambers, Emma's thoughts swirled with questions and plans. They had escaped one nightmare only to enter a vast, uncertain reality. Yet for the first time, she felt a flicker of control, a belief that together they might carve a path through the darkness. The Guardians' lessons were their lifeline, a beacon in the void. The next phase of their journey was dawning, and Emma was ready to face it head-on. The calm of the crystalline city faded quickly as Emma and the group prepared to leave the sanctuary and face the unknown expanse beyond. The glowing shards gifted by the Guardians pulsed softly in their hands, a comforting reminder of the power and knowledge they had gained, but also a warning. The void was vast, uncharted, and filled with dangers that no lesson could fully prepare them for. Emma's resolve hardened as they stepped through the city gates once more, leaving behind the safety of light and knowledge for the darkness waiting beyond. The transition was jarring. The vibrant radiance of the city gave way to a shadowed, star-speckled emptiness where the silence felt heavy and oppressive. The passengers clung close, their glowing shards casting faint pools of light in the darkness. Emma's senses sharpened, alert to every whisper of movement and flicker in the void. The Guardian's warning echoed in her mind. Beware the entities that seek to corrupt and consume. It wasn't long before the warning proved true. As they floated further into the void, shadowy forms began to emerge, amorphous creatures that writhed and twisted, their forms shifting like smoke and darkness. They moved silently, eyes glowing with malicious intent. The group tensed, instinctively raising their shards. Emma focused her energy, willing a shield of light to ripple outwards, pushing back the encroaching darkness. The creatures recoiled, hissing in frustration, but did not retreat entirely. They circled, probing for weaknesses, testing the group's defenses. Emma's heart hammered as she realized this was their first true battle, a fight not just for survival, but for their very souls. The passengers, though frightened, rallied around her, channeling their newfound abilities to hold the creatures at bay. Mark's calm precision directed their efforts, while Rachel's empathy helped soothe the group's growing fear. Hours stretched into an endless confrontation. Each attack from the shadowy entities tested their limits, draining energy and resolve. Emma felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down, but she refused to yield. "Remember the lessons," she urged. "Our strength is in unity and focus." The shards glowed brighter as they synchronized their will, weaving a net of shimmering light that forced the creatures back. Gradually, the shadows faltered, retreating into the darkness from which they came. The void grew silent once more, but the cost was clear. Wounds both physical and emotional marked the group. Emma scanned their faces, determination mixed with weariness, but no defeat. They had survived the first trial beyond city. Yet, the battle left a lingering unease. Emma knew the void was vast, and that far worse dangers lurked beyond the immediate shadows. The creatures were only the beginning, a reminder that this new reality was not just strange, but hostile. Every step forward would demand more courage, more resilience. As the group floated in the eerie silence, Emma's thoughts turned inward. The simulation, the city, the Guardians, they had all prepared them, but the true test was far from over. This was a realm of uncertainty, where the rules of their old world no longer applied. She wondered if they could truly trust the Guardians, or if there were deeper secrets hidden beneath their serene guidance. Despite the doubts, Emma felt a flicker of hope. They had come through darkness before and emerged stronger. The bonds between them had grown into something unbreakable. "We'll face whatever comes next, together," she vowed quietly, her voice carrying strength that steadied the group. As they moved forward into the vast expanse of stars and shadows, the glowing shards pulsed steadily, beacons of light in a universe that balanced precariously between hope and oblivion. Emma knew the journey ahead was fraught with peril, but for the first time since the nightmare began, she believed they could shape their destiny. The shadows beyond the light were many, but so were the stars. The void stretched endlessly ahead, an abyss both terrifying and mesmerizing. Emma's breath caught as the group drifted closer to a massive tear in the fabric of reality, a swirling rift of shimmering colors and chaotic energy, pulsing like a wound in the universe itself. The Guardians had warned of such anomalies, places where realities collided and warped unpredictably. This was the next great challenge. The shards in their hands vibrated intensely, responding to the rift's volatile power, as if warning them to stay back. The group gathered, tension thick in the air. Rachel's voice broke the silence, shaky but resolute. "What is that? Can we pass through it?" Mark studied the shifting patterns, eyes narrowed. "It's a gateway, or maybe a trap. We need to be careful. One wrong step, and we could be lost forever." Emma nodded, gripping her shard tightly. "We don't have a choice. It's the only path forward." Steeling themselves, they edged toward the rift. The colors inside twisted and shimmered, a chaotic dance of light and shadow. As they neared, the air grew thick with energy, making it difficult to breathe. Each heartbeat echoed loudly, as if the rift itself pulsed with a living rhythm. Emma felt her mind strain against the chaos, trying to hold onto clarity and purpose. Suddenly, a surge of energy blasted outward, knocking them back. The void around the rift seemed alive with malevolence, a force resisting their approach. The group struggled to regain footing in the weightless expanse, shards flaring to create protective shields. Emma's voice rang out, firm and commanding. "Focus on the light inside you. Let it guide you through the chaos." One by one, they pushed forward again, their combined will forging a path through the turbulent currents. The rift's energy clawed at their minds, dredging up fears and doubts, visions of failure, loss, and endless wandering. Emma fought the illusions, drawing strength from the group's unity. "We are more than fear," she whispered, steadying her breath. "We are survivors." As they crossed the threshold, the world shifted violently. The swirling chaos gave way to a new reality. Dark skies filled with stars that burned cold and distant. The void's emptiness was replaced by an eerie stillness, broken only by the distant howl of unseen winds. They had passed the rift, but the cost was clear. Each of them felt drained, their minds scarred by the encounter. Ahead lay a desolate landscape, jagged mountains silhouetted against a pale moon, vast plains of shimmering dust, and ruins of what might have been a city once. The air was thin, the temperature cold enough to bite through their skin. Emma looked back briefly, the rift closing silently behind them, sealing off the path home. For now. Rachel shivered. "Where are we now?" Mark's expression was grim. A frontier, a place where few have survived, but also a place of answers. Emma's gaze swept the horizon, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "We need to find shelter and understand this place. Every step could bring us closer to home, or further into the unknown." The passengers moved cautiously, their shards dimmed but still pulsing faintly. Emma led the way, senses alert for danger. The landscape was hauntingly beautiful but held an ominous stillness, as if time itself was frozen here. Shadows seemed to flicker at the edges of their vision, and the silence felt like a warning. Despite the fear, Emma felt a spark of hope. They had crossed the rift, survived its trials, and that meant they were stronger than the void's darkness. The journey was far from over, but each step forward was a victory. Together, they would face whatever this new reality held. The rift was behind them now, but the edge of the unknown stretched endlessly ahead, a daunting reminder that their true test was only beginning. The cold wind swept across the barren plains, carrying whispers of memories long buried. Emma stood at the edge of a ruined city, the remnants of buildings crumbling beneath a pale, indifferent sky. The shards in their hands pulsed faintly, a fragile thread connecting them to the crystalline city they had left behind. Each step forward felt heavy with longing and loss, but also with the faintest flicker of hope. This place, desolate as it was, held echoes of home, fragments of the world they had once known and a promise that they could return. Rachel shivered beside Emma, pulling her jacket tighter. "Do you think this is really our world?" she asked quietly, eyes scanning the horizon. Emma nodded, her gaze distant but steady. "It's a piece of it, a fragment caught in the void. The Guardian said there are many realities, many worlds. This might be one that bridges us back." Mark examined the ruins, his mind racing. "If we can understand this place, maybe we can find the key to unlocking the path home." They ventured deeper into the city's remains, the silence heavy with memories. Broken streets and shattered windows spoke of a sudden end, as if life had simply flickered out. But among the rubble, Emma noticed signs of life. Small green shoots pushing through cracks in the concrete, birds nesting in hollowed beams. The world was fragile, but not dead. There was resilience here, much like within themselves. As they explored, the shards began to glow brighter, reacting to something hidden beneath the surface. Following the light, Emma led the group to an underground chamber, its entrance concealed by debris. Inside, the walls were etched with symbols, the same glowing script from the crystalline city. The air was thick with ancient energy, and the group felt a quiet reverence. Rachel traced the symbols with her fingers, her voice trembling. This could be a map, directions to a place or a time where the threads of reality converge. Mark's eyes lit up. "If we can decipher this, we might find the portal to our true home." Emma felt a surge of determination. "Then we have to stay together and follow it, no matter what dangers lie ahead." But the chamber held more than just hope. As they worked to unravel the ancient script, a sudden tremor shook the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling, and distant echoes of footsteps reverberated through the tunnels. The void was stirring. Emma's heart pounded as shadows flickered at the edges of the light. "We're not alone," she warned, gripping her shard tighter. The group braced for what was coming, whether friend or foe. The journey had brought them through terrifying trials, but the promise of home pushed them forward. Every challenge had forged their courage and unity into something unbreakable. Emma knew the final stretch would demand everything they had. As the echoes grew louder, Emma glanced at her companions, faces marked by fear but shining with fierce resolve. "No matter what happens, we face it together," she said firmly. The shards glowed in response, casting a warm light in the darkness. The void shadow loomed close, but so did the light of hope. This was their chance to reclaim their world, their lives, and the future they had lost. The echoes of home called to them, and Emma was ready to answer. The chamber trembled with a growing intensity as Emma and the group faced the approaching shadows. Yet amid the encroaching darkness, the shards in their hands pulsed with steady light, anchors of their strength and unity. Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their journey press upon her, but also the fire of hope burning brighter than ever. This was the moment they had been fighting for, the moment to awaken fully and reclaim their lives beyond the void. The shadows surged forward, swirling tendrils of darkness reaching out like hungry fingers. But the group stood firm, their combined will shaping the energy around them. Emma focused on the shard's light, weaving it into a radiant shield that shimmered with warmth and power. The darkness met the shield and recoiled, shrieking in frustration but unable to break through. "Together," Emma called, her voice steady and strong. "Our light is stronger than their shadows." Drawing strength from each other, the group channeled their energy into a brilliant wave of light that surged outward, pushing back the darkness with an unyielding force. The chamber brightened, the ancient symbols glowing fiercely, as if awakening alongside them. The ground beneath their feet hummed, resonating with a deep, ancient power that pulsed in rhythm with their hearts. Suddenly, the rift they had once crossed flared to life again, this time as a shimmering portal of possibility. Emma's eyes widened with awe and relief. "This is it, the way home." But the portal was unstable, crackling with energy that threatened to tear apart reality itself. "We have to step through together," she said, "or risk being lost forever." Hand in hand, the group moved toward the portal. Each step was filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Fear of the unknown and hope for reunion with the world they had lost. As they crossed the threshold, the chaos of the void dissolved into a cascade of brilliant light that wrapped around them like a cocoon. Emma felt herself lifting, weightless and free, as memories flooded back. The warmth of sunlight, the laughter of friends, the familiar hum of life. When the light faded, they found themselves in a place both strange and comforting. A familiar airport terminal bustling with life, the murmur of travelers, the scent of coffee and polished floors. Emma blinked, disoriented but overwhelmingly grateful. Rachel laughed softly beside her, tears glistening in her eyes. "We're home." Mark scanned the crowd, noting the ordinary world's relentless pace, the endless flow of stories and possibilities. "It's more than we could have hoped for," he said quietly. Emma smiled, feeling a profound peace settle over her. Their journey through simulations, shadows, and cosmic rifts had forged something unbreakable inside them. A bond, a resilience, and a newfound appreciation for the fragile beauty of reality. But the experience had changed them irrevocably. They were no longer ordinary passengers on a plane or mere travelers in life. They were survivors, awakeners, ready to face whatever challenges the world might bring, armed with the strength of their journey and the light they carried within. As the group embraced amidst the bustling terminal, Emma glanced up at the overhead screens displaying flight arrivals and departures. Somewhere out there, beyond ordinary sight, the threads of countless realities intertwined, fragile, yet resilient. And she knew, no matter what, she would never stop fighting to protect that fragile light. The nightmare had ended. Their awakening had begun. Thank you for joining Emma and her companions on this extraordinary journey through shadows and light, across worlds both strange and familiar. Their story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, hope and courage can guide us home. If this adventure touched you, inspired you, or kept you on the edge of your seat, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means the world and helps bring more stories like this to life. Stay curious, stay brave, and until next time, keep chasing the light.